Good morning and welcome. We're happy to be here and hope that you will join us. It snowed this morning and I was surprised to get up and see all that white stuff. I loved it, but I had to go down the basement and get my boots. Excuse me. Um, I don't know, when it snows, I think it's warm and cozy, and I think people are friendlier to each other. If you're out shoveling snow, people say, "Hi, how are you?" I really love it, but I know it's dangerous driving. In our community, there's a lot of good things going on, but before we talk about that, I would like to introduce Reverend Dr. Reuben Bell. And welcome to my show.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming. And I want you to tell me how you got interested in all the wonderful things you do. Start from where you want to.
My goodness. I guess it would start with the fact that I am an osteopathic doctor, and I don't know where to start with that because that wasn't the beginning.
Okay, let's go back even before. What made you decide to be a doctor?
I think I had no doctors in my family. I came from just a regular kind of middle-class family in Oklahoma, and my people were oil field workers and farmers. But I was a crazy kid, and I was always being hurt, and I would always end up in the emergency room. And as they were sewing me up, I just actually enjoyed it because I enjoyed watching how much fun the doctors seemed to be having. At that time, they were all young interns who worked in the emergency room. There was no emergency room specialty. And they were all young people, young guys back then, and they just seemed to be having a ball. And I think the bug kind of bit me then. And then in high school, I had a friend whose father was a doctor, and he was very kind to me at a time of life where I needed some kindness. And I think that also marked me a little bit. But mainly, I grew up in the 50s, and if you remember, if you were there, our government was promoting science above all things because the Russians were getting ahead of us in the space race. And so they just pushed science, science, science. And I took the bait, and I loved science, and I began to love biology. And I think that also fueled my interest in all things scientific and then medical. And then in college, I majored in zoology, which was just hard sciences, biological sciences. And then I got a master's degree in zoology and thought about being a professor, getting a PhD in that, but I just wanted to be a doctor because of the fun that I thought I would have.
Well, did it turn out to be fun?
It did. It's turned out to be lots of fun. I have 35 years to look back on. It's become less fun as the regulatory burden in medicine has increased from both industry and government. But even that, once I get in the room with the patient and close the door, it's nothing but fun. And so I think that's what drove me, just a love of science. And I think some very early experiences with physicians that were positive in a weird kind of way. And then I'm a firm believer in providence, which is unseen and can only be understood at all, if at all, from the back, from behind. And I think providence led me into a field called osteopathic medicine. And that, again, was just on the basis of a couple of friendships that I made. And I entered that branch of medicine, and it's been very good to me because intellectually it's a very stimulating place to be. It has some interesting roots in philosophical pursuits concerning body, mind, and spirit. And although the word holistic has been just beaten to death, it's still a descriptive word. Osteopathy is very holistic if it's practiced as it should be practiced. And so I ended up in that. It suited me, and I just went from there.
Look at all you've learned.
Yeah.
And then you became a reverend.
I did that after about 10 years in practice. I went into practice, general practice in the country, in Freiburg, where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a country doctor. I don't know why. And as I practiced, and my practice got busier and busier and busier, and I had all kinds of patients, and I realized I was raised to be religious, but I don't know what that meant. I had a religion but it did nothing towards explaining things to me, ultimate things. I guess it should, but it didn't. And maybe that's my fault, but I wanted to know, we use the term body, mind, and spirit a lot. And in osteopathy, we use it a lot. But the problem is, body, we know, that's kind of medicine. Mind is sort of psychology, psychiatry. We believe that we understand that. We really don't, but we think we do, so that makes us feel good. But when we go to spirit, that becomes kind of an unknown territory for most people. And they don't know how to define it. If you're working with something that you can't define, it's really not very useful.
Well, you can't put your hands on it.
No, and you don't have a model for it. It's not useful. So I discovered the theological philosophy of Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a kind of an interesting figure of the Enlightenment, born in 1688. And he was a scientist the first half of his life and then turned theologian, mystical theologian. And discovered him, again, by providence. And he had a lot to say about spirit as it pertains to mind and body. He had the same question, how does this work? And he was a very brilliant man and never stopped working on the problem and developed a model that I think is very compelling. It's also very rational. It doesn't involve magic. And so I've studied him for many years. And I went off to the seminary for a kind of a total immersion experience in his works. There's 30 volumes of theology and another 25 volumes of his science, and so that's a lot to get a grip on. And in doing so, I developed my own model for body, mind, and spirit with his guidance, and then in a roundabout way, returned to medicine. Now, the way I returned was interesting. Again, providence. Where I was in the seminary, there was a college that supported the theological school. The college had a major in biology. One of their primary professors had to quit abruptly because of a health problem, and I had the credentials to step into his place. So for the 9 years that I was in this community, my full-time job was teaching biology to college students while I was going to the seminary on the side, you might say. Well, again, there I was back in the sciences. I was like a pig in mud, they say. I was back in the sciences, and yet I was studying theology that was compatible with the science that I was teaching. So again, heaven on earth. And so I finally, all good things must end, did a stint in full-time ministry of 5 years after that in
Now, when you did that, you were not a doctor.
well, was on the side. I've always
okay.
been a doctor on the side, even when I'm in other things. But I did a full-time ministry thing in Sudbury, Mass, and then I did doctoring on my day off. I did it on Monday and Tuesday. And
Did you find spirit?
I did. I found how I think spirit works. And I may be totally wrong, but I have a model that works for me. When we're talking about spirit, it's a very difficult thing to comprehend, but there's no reason not to try to comprehend it. You can't just say, we'll understand it better by and by.
I think it's fascinating,
It
wonderful.
It is, and we have to know something about it. And then when we do, we can act accordingly. Now I've come back into medicine. When I was in Sudbury, they needed a part-time person 1 day a week up here at the University of New England. And so I would drive up, and I would drive up on Monday and work, and then I would stay over and work on Tuesday. I would teach students on Monday and work in a clinic on Tuesday.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And so then they needed, at one point, a director of medical humanities. And so I left there, came here, took that over, and that was a pretty much full-time teaching job. But again, I'm teaching the medical humanities, which is the human side of medicine, which has to do with ethics, philosophy, history and philosophy of medicine, patient-doctor relationship, death and dying, all those things that I now am bridging from my theology to my science in medicine. So again, providence at work, I suppose, put me there, and I did that for almost 8 years. So again, though, would never have done any of this if I hadn't have stopped early on and said, let's go find more information. And I was willing to do that. So then I ended up at UNE, which is here, of course, and I kind of had come full circle because I started out practice in Freiburg, and now I'm kind of back in Maine after 12 years, and in a teaching capacity with a little bit of practice on the side. And then I guess the next step was I eventually went full-time with the practice on the side with UNE, doing, again, kind of providential, doing work in long-term care and rehabilitation medicine, which means I worked with people who've had devastating injuries or surgeries who are there in an institution to rehab and go home. But I'm also working with long-term care people.
Yeah, what is that exactly?
Long-term care simply means people who are unable to live at home. Generally it means older people who can't take care of themselves.
Okay.
These are nursing home patients that we call them. Nursing home is long-term care.
And then,
yeah.
change the subject a little bit.
Go ahead.
Jill supported you, Mrs. Bell.
Oh, my wife, totally. I met her, when I met her, she was a nurse. She claimed the reason I liked her was because she had a job, but it's not totally true.
And
but,
raised a family.
Yeah, and so she worked with me always in my practice, raised the family, and has worked as a nurse all these years. She just recently claims to have retired after 41 years of nursing, but she was right there all the way.
She's a beautiful lady and a good friend.
Oh, yeah.
She's very pretty, very nice.
And
You're
interestingly, while I was doing long-term care, she became a hospice nurse and would be assigned to patients. I was a medical director at 4 places, and she would be assigned to individual patients, often in the places where I was the director, which meant they were my patients too. So in a strange way, we were working together on the same patients at the ends of their lives.
Takes a special person to work for hospice.
Oh, yeah.
I know that.
Oh, sure. And she did it. And I came to enjoy working with people at the end of their lives. Again, I have developed a model over my lifetime that truly sees death as just the next step. It's not something to be feared, not something to be avoided, like try to avoid death, go ahead. But the fact is, people do in their own minds. They avoid speaking about it. And I
think that's getting better, though.
It is much better.
I think so.
Yeah. I was invited to teach a course up in Toronto to a group of people from what's called Canadian College of Osteopathy there. It was just like 3 weeks ago. They wanted a 12-hour course on end-of-life care. We used to call it death and dying, but we don't like the word death. So now we call it end-of-life care. And I talked about all this to those students for hours.
I think that's important more now even than before, because you have all these soldiers coming back, and when they get to the end of life, if they've killed somebody or what they had to do.
Right, and if you don't have an understanding of what death is all about, then you're devastated by it. And you're just left bereft. You have no idea how to deal with it. All you need is a model. And as I said, my model may not be right, but it's a good model. It's a rational model, and I call it intellectually defensible. In other words, it's not just some magical thinking. I can take you through the reasoning that brings me there. You can disagree, but you still can't just dismiss it. It's a rationally supported model.
Okay, now we've got 2 things, spirit and death.
Yeah.
Now, I die. What happens to spirit?
Well, you are an amalgamation of 2 things primarily. No offense, but you are a non-living being concerning the matter that you're made out of. You're made out of stuff, no different than the stuff of that chair, the stuff of the tile on the floor. It's matter. Now, it's created matter, but it's matter nonetheless, and it's not alive. So what about you is alive? The fact is, your matter is animated by the spirit that is flowing into you at every given moment. So you're animated like a light bulb isn't a light bulb until the electricity flows through it. So you're a light bulb, and spirit flows into you and causes you to live. But at some point, you and I will no longer live in this world, which means your body will die. Why? Because it can't function anymore. Something will go wrong with it. It'll go haywire, and it will die. Spirit never changes. It just moves on without a hitch. William Blake, kind of a mystical poet, said it's like removing from one room to another. You just like going through a door. except you leave that body behind.
And the light bulb goes.
The light bulb stays behind. But what moves into the next phase is your spirit, which has perfect human form to begin with, and your existence never stops. In fact, it changes only that you now are free of the restraints of the natural world, which are all the things that bring us down, space and time and gravity and all those things that wreck us over time.
Now that leads me to another question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if these are good questions or not, but what about, we're made of what we are.
Matter.
Okay, now we talk about food.
Mm-hmm.
Where does food must affect this.
Food is this. You know the old cliche, you are what you eat?
Yeah.
Well, you are made out of stuff that at one point was ingested and then incorporated into the body that you have. You started life as a cell, well, actually invisible to the eye, one single cell that you got from your mother, essentially. And it was already up and running. From that point forward, it had to be fed, and as it divided, the other cells had to be fed. Once you were born and on your own, you had to feed it, which you have been doing now since you were doing that. But every bit of your existence, physical existence, comes from what at one point crossed through your teeth. And so that then, in terms of health, becomes exceedingly important, because if you eat junk, you will be made of junk. If you eat GMO corn, then your carbohydrates, some, will be made from GMO carbohydrate. It's a kind of a scary thought. If you eat low quality protein, then you just won't be made of the same stuff. And worse yet, the lipids that we eat are incorporated into the cell membranes of every cell that we have, including the cell membranes of our mitochondria, where our energy comes from. And if that's not the right kind of lipids, it'll work, but not well. And as a physician, I encounter so many people who are working but not well. And what they need is not pills and not surgery. They need a program of eating the right stuff. And then over time, and it's not a long time, but over time, they begin to replace their not so hot parts with real good parts. And then they have more energy. And here's the good part. The spirit that is flowing into you is also form. It brings form. It's what heals. So the spirit is constantly trying to return your material body to its perfect form that you had when you were 2 years old.
Isn't that good?
Yes, and there are limitations because
Yeah.
it can't, if I have an old arthritic knee, that's just what I've got. But the spirit is constantly trying to restore normal form, but part of the equation is to provide that physical body with the right things so that spirit can move into proper form. When people change their diets alone and then begin to give their body exercise, which then basically increases circulation and delivers all these things to the place where they're supposed to go. When they do that, over a period of 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they actually change. They look different. Not only do they have more energy, but they have a different form, which means they've refurbished their body, and they actually look different. Sometimes things that used to bother them don't so much anymore, like arthritis. And it's not
Isn't
magic.
that wonderful that your body will do that?
It will if you'll let it. So many people in America just simply don't understand that. And when you tell them it is so simple, they won't believe you. We've been brainwashed by industry to believe that the only way to get well is with pills. And pills don't get us well. I'll tell you a secret. Pills keep us in a state somewhere between wellness and death, because we're not worth anything to the pharmaceutical industry if we're dead, and we're not worth anything to them if we're well. Where do they want us? Somewhere in between. And that's where we are suspended in large part in our American way of health. Healthcare is disease management in our system. That's not right. Osteopathy had a founder named A.T. Still, who was kind of a visionary frontier doctor back in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and quite a character. But he said, the job of the doctor is to find the health in the patient. and
That's
bring
good.
it out.
Those are good words. Say them again.
He said the job of the doctor, the real doctor, is to find the health in the patient, because we know it's there, you're alive, and then bring it out. But he says any fool can find disease. It's just true. And the trouble is in medical schools, including some very near and dear, we just teach finding disease. And then once we've named it, we put a pill on it and we go our way. A.T. Still would say that's wrong. Find the health, bring it out, and then as a last resort, maybe pharmaceuticals if we knew what we're using and why we're using it for. But those are concepts that are ancient and they're Greek essentially, and they need to be reclaimed. And they are being reclaimed, even as we speak. I have just started in this last year as a practitioner at a place called True North Clinic in Falmouth that is kind of dedicated to what is now kind of called, what's called integrative holistic medicine. Now that's cliche ridden, but it is true. It's integrative and holistic. Integrative means I, as a physician, take whatever is available and I'll use it for your case. If you're my patient and you've got some problems, I might use pharmaceuticals to begin with to put out a fire. But I might use acupuncture. I might send you to the massage therapist. I might use certain supplements. I might use Chinese herbs, as crazy as that sounds. Sometimes they do a delightful job for decreasing inflammation. I might use probiotics for your intestine because that's where most disease starts. And so now I have a golf bag that instead of having 5 clubs, it has 500 clubs. Now, the art comes in knowing which one to use. You can't just throw them all at a patient. And some people might try that. But you gotta know enough to know what to use in each case. And that's what I am doing now. And yes?
Oh, let's back up a little bit. You're talking about herbs.
Yes.
And
Supplements.
supplements.
Yeah. Those.
Natural supplements,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, sure. In fact, they're the best. Natural supplements. The word supplement says it all. It supplements your diet. Now, if you had a proper diet and you were rolling along in good health, you wouldn't need a bunch of supplements except for one problem. The food in our grocery stores is depleted of a lot of supplements. And supplements are nothing more than vitamins and then metallic elements called minerals, like zinc, magnesium, all those. Our soil is depleted.
Another thing too, excuse me.
Yeah.
We get older. Does our body absorb everything that's supposed to?
No. As we get older, we absorb we absorb inefficiently. So sometimes females, for one reason or another, don't absorb iron as they get older as well as other people do. Well, that would be a good place to supplement. You say, well, you need a little extra because you're not absorbing. When you don't absorb iron, of course, you get anemic. And as we get older, face it, nothing works as well. But absorption is a problem in some cases. You have to be aware of that. And so you normalize the diet. If you need iron, we'll move the diet towards iron-rich foods, and then we can still get levels. If you're still low, we'll give you some ferrous sulfate twice a day, and there's nothing wrong with that. So again, judicious use of everything. I've taught medical students for years. I tell them if you're going to use anything in terms of a pill, I don't care if it's pharmaceutical or a supplement, know what it is you're using, know what's wrong with the patient. In other words, why you're using it. And if you can't answer those questions, don't give them the medicine. Sometimes doctors are sometimes patients really expect doctors to give them pills. And I've had patients disappointed with me before because they would come to me and we would talk and they wouldn't leave with a prescription. And they really thought they needed that. Instead, I would tell them, I might write them a prescription that says walk 30 minutes twice a day, and write that on a prescription pad and give it to them. It's not the same. I've written prescriptions before to tell people to read some Psalms out of the book of Psalms in the Old Testament. And I would write Psalm this or that, rip it off, say here, and read that once a day, just like a pill. And there's all kinds of ways you treat people without pills. I'm not anti-pill. And neither was the founder of osteopathy. He was anti-pills that we use when we don't even know why we're using them. Pills are dangerous. And The side effects of pills can be devastating. People die all the time from combinations of pharmaceuticals that produce side effects that no one knows what they are, and you'd have to be very careful. I like pharmaceuticals, but you have to know how they work and when you want to use them, which means I have to know what's wrong with you to start with, and that's a problem sometimes. So I've come to a point in life where I told this group of students in Canada, my motto has become less is more. And sometimes even doing nothing is a good thing. Whereas before, as an aggressive, eager young physician, I would never have thought that. More is better, And I've come to learn that sometimes less is more, and that the body has its own wisdom. My job as a physician is not to tell you what to do, it's to work with you as a consultant or a facilitator or whatever, and help you find out the cause of your problem. I can't always do that, but you can a lot. Find the cause of your problem, identify it, take the cause away. And when you do, it's the funniest thing, the disease can just no longer exist. You don't drive it out. See, the modern medical model is to find the disease and drive it out with pharmaceuticals, poisons, radiation, whatever. And then we drive it out in a military model. The trouble is the patient's body is the battleground, so sometimes it suffers pretty heavily. If you look at disease, not as an invader, which it isn't, a disease is an unwelcomed guest. By that I mean it's a guest that was welcome once, but now stays too long, sets up shop, becomes a permanent visitor in your house, which is your body. Often you let it in. You let it in by habits, by diet, by poor mental health, by whatever. And it came in very quietly, just going to stay a couple of weeks. You ever have a guest like that? And the next thing you know, it's there forever. And so what do? Set it on fire to get rid of it? No, because that burns down your house. What you do is you make it uncomfortable. Maybe you change I don't know, the analogy breaks down. The point is you make the guest uncomfortable. You're no longer feeding the guest. You say, by the way, starting tomorrow, we're not feeding you. Well, about 3 days later, the guest will just go out the door. And that's pretty much the way my mind works in terms of disease. Find the cause and do something to remove the cause. And that's not easy. You can't do it overnight. Sometimes removing the cause might take a year. But as you're doing it, the guest is saying, hey, what's going on here? And it diminishes. So my model is unwelcome guest, change the environment, and the disease goes away. Because diseases mostly, the diseases of the Western world are diseases of the Western diet. And they're not diseases. They're maladaptations to long-term misuse of your own body. When you eat the wrong stuff all the time, you'll develop a condition that kind of adapts to that. It's a survival mechanism, but it's dysfunctional, and therefore we look at it and call it a disease. And then we want to drive it out. That's nuts. You want to change the reason it's there, and then it will leave. It will disappear.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
And I like it. But what about when you get old? Say 80, 90s. Your body's going to break down.
It will. It's genetically programmed to break down. And that's troubling to a lot of people and troubling to researchers. Right now, a week doesn't go by that you don't read on the internet about somebody who's going to defeat aging by...
Always anti-aging.
Oh yeah, anti-aging. Why? Well, basically we fear death as a culture. That's really why the anti-aging. And we're all narcissists, so we just can't imagine ever aging at all, or much less dying. But we find people, researchers, all the time trying to defeat aging. Well, live to be 120, live to be 150. The point is, from a spiritual point of view, we have to look at aging for what it is. Our bodies are programmed to age and disappear, to go away. Well, first of all, if we didn't die, we would just clog up the planet. In a way, if you want to get really simplistic, young people need to enter in and become adults and take over and be in charge and do their lives. If people are living forever, then that's going to screw their whole program up. There's a reason that we're on a conveyor belt. Now, if you look at it in spiritual terms, something I didn't used to understand, we're not going to die anyway. We're in this life to do certain things. And as we enter the end of our life, if we do it right, in a healthy way, we have the good death, what they call the good death. We just get weak and we die. And then what? We go right into the next phase. We don't die anyway. And that's why people have such trouble, is they don't understand about the next phase. And the next phase is, of course, difficult to understand because we can't see it.
I know.
No, but the fact is, if there is a next phase and you know about it, believe it, then you won't fear death quite so bad. The idea of aging as a normal function of life. You see, we study embryology, and then once a baby's born, we quit studying embryology. Our embryology never stops. The aging process began with conception, and then it goes through stages as an embryo, and then a fetus, and then wham, you're born, and then it's like, oh, we're done. No, we're not. Look at the changes that a child goes through, and then once we're adults, we quit thinking about it. Look at the changes young adults go through, physical, and then older, and finally, the body can no longer perform its functions. The heart and lungs can no longer work, and we lose our attachment. We, meaning the body, loses its attachment to the spiritual world. And what does it do? Falls off like an old coat, and then you keep walking through. So if you understand that about aging, even aging ceases to be such a fearful thing. The only bad thing about aging is all your parts quit working and your knees hurt and you can't see and you got to have 2 hearing aids. But you have to see that as just something that you have to deal with.
Natural.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's
then
meant
once
to
you
be,
understand that you don't care you as much. And like I said, I wish my knee worked better. I wish I could hear better. But you know, it's just what you get. It's the price of doing business. And I've known old people, many, who actually understand this. And they're pleasant and they're happy and they don't care that their knees don't work because they get it. And these are the people who die the good death because they're also not afraid of the death that's coming. And I think the older people get, the more they accept that fact. They accept death beautifully if they are given the environment that is receptive of it.
That's where your mind comes in too.
Yes, totally.
Because it's what you think.
It is what you think, and the way
Attitude.
the way you think boils down directly into how you act.
But you know what? Sometimes when you're hurting and you don't feel good, it's hard to have a good attitude.
It is, and that's where other people come in, because we don't live alone. We shouldn't. If you're alone and hurting, and towards the end of your life, you shouldn't be doing that alone. We have people. We have such a sick society, we have to hire people to go sit with you because other people won't. We just don't get it. But that's why hospice is such a winner. Well, these people will come and do what families used to do. But it's sort of a surrogate family. That's okay. It works great. But you shouldn't do that alone because we'll have days that are bad. And those days we need support. We all need to be aware of that.
Like at my age, I have so many friends that I've lost. They're in nursing homes, or assisted living, or surgery. Some are fine and accept it. Some hurt all day long. Old age.
It is. And everybody gets their own brand of that. And it's not all good. But again, it has to do with how you do at age 86 has a lot to do with how you were doing at age 26. Has to do with your attitude toward life. Has to do with your attitude toward what you will eat. Has your attitude toward being busy or not busy. An attitude toward loving other people or not loving other people. It has to start here. And if it starts here, there's a good chance that at 86 it'll be good. Now, not 100% chance, because we live in a natural world that's full of uncertainty. And people do get devastating diseases. They get painful diseases. And that's a hard thing. That's when, like I say, when we have to help them bear up under that strain.
And then, like spirit, maybe you don't have a physical thing, but something happens that just hurts you so deep.
Yes. Well, that happens a lot at any age. In fact, if you look at statistics and people have done studies, something comes along and hurts you, whatever that is.
I'm talking about a deep hurt.
Yeah, a deep hurt, a deep emotional, which is mental, which is spiritual, it's all the same. A deep hurt that a person is unable to process well. Now, if you can process it well, it would be like a big wave comes and slaps you, and then the wave moves on. Because we're actually programmed to handle some pretty bad stuff. But if you don't, and it hurts you badly, and that wave or that hurt stays.
You might have more than one wave.
Yes. Oh yeah, and that happens. What happens is it will manifest as physical disease.
Go ahead,
Easily.
continue.
Well, I was talking to a lady, I don't know, less than a month ago, who's about 60, and I see her once a year. And since I had seen her before, I'm not a great friend to her, but I see her once a year. I end up eating dinner with her every year, once a year.
Nice.
And at a meeting. And since I have seen her, she said she had colon cancer with resective surgery and 2 courses of chemotherapy. I said, whoa, and that's awful. And she said, well, I won't go into the gory details, but she had been treated poorly by someone, very poorly, and it upset her so badly that she said, I'm certain that's what unleashed this cancer.
Stress, maybe?
Yeah. Oh yeah, stress and all that. And that's, I mean, is she right or not? I don't know. But in many cases, disease will follow emotional upset because it has, well, it's not magical. It has a direct effect on our immune system. Stress will just wipe you out, and part of what it wipes out is the ability of your immune cells to find malignant cells or whatever, and you're a sitting duck for infection and cancer. And that's why we have to teach people. People need to learn how to maintain during periods of stress, because we're all going to get it, and some get it very badly. Some people just have bad luck. I mean, they're just simply, like you said, it might be 2 waves, 3 waves. It's like you wreck your car and then someone dies and then you break your leg. I mean, that could happen all within a week. And how are you supposed to deal with that stress? Well, you just do the best you can. But there's a good chance that person 6 weeks to 6 months later might end up with a flare-up of their rheumatoid arthritis or a colitis or cancer or
depression.
Depression, definitely.
That's
or they might come down with an infectious disease that they wouldn't have otherwise. Oh, it's a very common story.
You know, the more we talk, the more questions I can think to ask you.
There are some wonderful things here. There are some wonderful principles here, and they have to do with how body, mind, and spirit interact. They're a unit of 3. You can't really separate the 3. They're always speaking to one another. They are truly a single entity, and the only difference is at death the body goes. And at that point, good riddance. And then what you end up with is mind and spirit that continue on. And with some unlimited potential there. But you're no longer hampered by physical ails. I've helped a lot of people, old people for the most part, through their deaths. I used to love to do that when I was doing full-time long-term care. And I would always tell them, not always, for the ones who I thought were receptive of it, I would say, you know, it's going to be so good when you finally let go of this beat-up old body, because all your parts will work, your mind will be sharp, your vision is good, and you'll have unlimited understanding of things that you never could understand before. And you'll be in an environment where it's a protective environment, and you can then become who it is you really need to be. And some of these people really take the bait. What it does, it could be a lie for that matter, I don't think it is, but what it does, it causes them to completely relax and quit worrying about what's happening now and look at something hopeful for the future. And a person who is dying can be given hope, always. And that's what I like to do. But I don't do it with magic. I do it with just factual, rational talk about how your body works, how your mind works, and how your spirit works, and what your spirit is getting ready to do in that case very soon. And it's very, very calming to people. And I think that's something I've done in my life that I've enjoyed maybe the most, is working with people at the end of their lives. But I like to do a lot of other things too.
That's great. I've learned a lot, and I could ask, many more questions.
Yep.
Now what are you doing now?
Right now, I'm a full-time practitioner, as I said, at True North. True North is a integrative holistic clinic. I'll tell you a little bit about it. It's very unique. It's been in existence for almost 10 years. It was started by some physicians, some nurses, and some alternative health practitioners, such as acupuncture people, massage therapists, and a couple of therapists, psychotherapists, who got together and said, now this was 8 to 10 years ago, who said, our healthcare delivery system is falling apart. Well, look at today, how much worse it is falling apart. So they were really ahead of the game. They said, let's get off the grid. Let's have a clinic where people work independently. So I'm an independent practitioner, although I work with other people. We have a facility there that's a beautiful facility with all of the amenities that we need, including personnel, people who work the front desk, people who are medical assistants, people who do all the stuff. And then as a practitioner there, we all of us practitioners pay a monthly fee for that. For what we, in practice, you call that overhead. And it's good overhead there. And then we are free then to practice as we please. No one tells me how long I have to see you. I worked in situations before where my appointments were 15 minutes. And then they would throw stuff on top of that. And I was just running from one room to the next, trying to help people with their complex medical problems. And by the time I was towards the end of the day, I'd be trying to do them in 10 minutes. And finally, I just said, this is no good. I ain't doing it anymore.
What can you do in 10 minutes?
All you can do is just say hello.
Oh, how are you?
Yeah. And
goodbye.
all right. Mostly goodbye. Anyway, so there I am at True North, and I'm back to what I have come full circle. I'm back to where I began the first day I started practice as a young pup. I have a room. It has, I'll tell you about the table in a minute. It has a room, it has a treatment table, it has my desk, and it has a chair. And then when you come in there, we talk, and then we do whatever it is we do. But I have appointments that are 30 minutes, an hour, it doesn't matter. It's up to me. The innovative part of this practice is, when you come there, we don't do insurance, meaning we're not participators in insurance, because when you are, several things happen. They limit what you can do. They limit what the patient is able to do. They'll decide what they will and won't pay for, and they put us all under the thumb of a regulatory apparatus that's run by people who aren't doctors. And that is private industry, insurance, and it's also government. Government's worse because it's run by much dumber people, but it's the same thing. And so when you leave there, I will give you a receipt. It's called a super bill, and it has all the codes on it that you will need to submit that to your own insurance. A few years ago, that's the way it worked anyway. Now, it doesn't so much, and people don't understand that. But we are off the grid. The insurance person is not there telling me what I can and can't do. Government doesn't tell me what I can and cannot do. It's wonderful. It's me and you, and that in the room, and no third party. So it is innovative in that sense. And 8 years ago, it was innovative. Now, it's ultra innovative because the intrusion of government into our health care will be the end of it as we know it. If you don't know what it's going to look like, look at England. That's all you need to know. We are England. So here sits True North. We are not England. We are True North. And so that's why it's unique, and that's why I like it.
That's the way it should be.
It should be. It's patient-doctor relationship on steroids.
When you get my age, you see a lot of changes.
Yes.
Some you are hard to accept.
Right.
Look at the VA. What a mess.
What a mess. Why? Who's it run by? Oh, the government.
Was it run? Was it run?
Well, no, it was run into the ground. But I don't like to get, I love to get political, but not here.
No.
But the fact is, it's run by the wrong people. And that's all there is to it. But that's another topic for
I
another
know
day.
everything leads to something else.
It does.
Yeah.
But now, the last bit, I am an osteopathic doctor, and from the very beginning of my practice, I have always seen the unique place for osteopathic manipulative therapy, it's called, manipulation, hands-on medicine. And in my lifetime, I have studied that more and more and more. There's many kinds of that. And in my lifetime, I have learned new and different kinds have come online, from old-fashioned, what we call manipulation, to much less aggressive and more gentle modalities. And I know them all. And again, it's like a golf bag. You have different things you can use on different people. And that has become the staple of my practice, because your body is responding to all the stresses in the universe. And often there are things we can do to correct that physically. And a lot of physicians don't know that and don't understand that. But in my office, I treat people physically a lot, because my treatment table is right there, and it is a large part of what I do. I've learned over the years from some experts on what part that plays in the treatment of all kinds of problems, not just bad backs, but disease. And I've learned a lot from my friends in Canada who teach a method that's very effective, and other people in the U.S. and Europe. So osteopathy, in my case, is true and pure traditional osteopathy that involves hands-on when necessary, and it's very effective at making people better. That's all there is to it.
Now, another question. You went to England.
Mhm.
Did you ever finish?
Yes, I'm finishing. I went to England 3 years, 3 summers for 2 weeks each. That was part of a program. That was a required residence to take courses for a total of 6 weeks. Part of a program by, part of a PhD program that I am enrolled in, that where I'm writing a dissertation, and then the class work was done at Oxford University 2 weeks at a time for 3 years in a row. And it's called Graduate Theological Foundation. They're in Indiana. The place has been around for 36 years at this point. And they make it possible for ordained clergy to get graduate degrees while they're still working out in the world. That was their reason for coming online all those years ago. It began as a Catholic organization at Notre Dame for priests who were assigned here and there and couldn't leave their parish in order to do a master's or a doctorate. And so they would make it possible for them. Then they would do these sabbaticals at that time, to Rome to do their classwork. And then at some point they decided, what the heck, all ordained clergy can do this. In my case, they have a program that was perfect for me, because it accepted people who had a Master of Divinity, who had written a thesis, and who had been required to work 2 years of either Latin, Greek, or Hebrew. And I fit those criteria, thank goodness. So then I could go directly into a PhD program, write a dissertation, and then do my classwork. I chose to do it in Oxford. And so I'm all done, except I'm almost finished with my dissertation. And
That's wonderful.
I'll finish that within the next few months. I have a dissertation advisor who is very exacting, and so he's making me work and work and work. But it's fun.
Yeah. Are you writing about just one thing in your dissertation, or?
I'm writing about one thing, but as you probably know by now, it's taking me a long time to get there, because that one thing is connected to a lot of other things. I'm writing about science and religion. I'm writing about this whole problem of soul, of body, mind, spirit. And I am writing about what the first part is. You want to hear about this?
Yes.
Okay. The first part has to do with introducing Emanuel Swedenborg as a scientist.
Now, I know a little bit about him.
I know you do. And I'm introducing him as a scientist, and I'm introducing some very powerful principles that he came up with as a scientist, when he was also looking for a secret of body, mind, spirit. And in order to do that, he had to invent some what he called doctrines, or spiritual principles or paradigms, in order to step into that. So the first part of my paper just goes all over that. It lines them up. It explains them. and some of them are not easily explained. Then the last part that I'm finishing now is maybe the hardest part, but by far the most fun. I make the claim in that thesis or dissertation that Swedenborg's methods are as useful to us today as they were 200 plus years ago, that he left them for us. And they're for people, or for scientists, who claim to be theistic scientists. I'm doing science from the firm conviction that there are two worlds and that all reality comes from spirit into nature. That's my claim. So as a scientist, I'm working that way. If that's true, and if Swedenborg truly did have powerful tools to use as we do science, then I'm going to take that, I'm doing it right now, take that and apply that to a problem in contemporary biology. The biggest problem in contemporary biology is the giant argument over evolution. How do forms come into the world, and how do these forms change and adapt to changes in, slow changes in their environment over time? Well, I told you I had a bachelor's and a master's degree in zoology, taught evolution from one end of that to the other by some very good professors, and I know that field, and I know the limitations of that field. There are some gaps, there are some serious limitations there that are just in any scientific field. The limitations are most scientists are keeping the science of evolution in a totally natural environment. Fine, but it doesn't answer questions for me. People have tried to apply spiritual principles to evolution, but they haven't done it very well. God love them, they're doing their best job, but they haven't done it very well. I'm going to come along, do it my own way, and explain how spirit can enter into the process of evolution at the very lowest level of matter, impart form into that matter, and then let matter respond to natural principles as they come along, so that things of nature are put together in freedom and yet bear the mark of the Creator, which is the human form. So that's what I'm trying to write. Wish me luck. But
I wish you luck.
I'm trying to apply some pretty good spiritual principles to the scientific principles that need help. They need to be rehabilitated. And so that's what I'm doing.
I think that's wonderful.
It's fun.
Oh.
Because it's science and religion. It's what I've always
Our
wanted to do.
time is up.
Okay.
I want to thank you for coming.
Well, I've enjoyed being here.
I knew I was going to love it, and I was going to hear some answers.
Well, I don't know if they're answers or not. They're my own answers to my own questions.
Well, I believe in your answers
And they're
because they
models.
make sense.
Good. They make sense to
I
me.
like when you treat the help that's in the person.
Yep.
I like that.
It's yours. I help bring it out.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful.
Good.
And again, I thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's
I'll
been
come
a
back
pleasure.
and do some more.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You're welcome. When you finish your dissertation, you can come back and tell
I
us
will.
about it.
That's a good goal.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
I've been working on it for a long time.
That's thinking and words and vocabulary and grammar and
And making my dissertation advisor happy too, that's another thing. You have to do that all the way. Because I'm making some kind of wild claims, and he's a person that wants me to make the claims in a very proper way. So he's helping me do it right.
good,
It's fun.
good. Well, folks, I found it very interesting. I knew it would be because I know Mr. Bell a little bit. You know, we're going into the season of giving, and our community works together, and there are so many fairs and so many things going around town. I would just like to remind you of a few. The first one I'm going to remind you of is our Greek Bazaar is next week, the 22nd, and the ladies have been baking and the chefs have been cooking, and they're all looking forward to serving everybody. And I'm always a coffee lady, so I look forward to seeing you too. We'll have the different tables, and it'll be a fun day, and there's going to be a nice lunch. I'll read you the menu, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Menu is, I know it by heart, but I want to make sure I don't forget anything. We're going to have spanakopita, that's spinach pie, which everybody loves. And we're going to have gyros, and I think you all know what that is. Let me see, what else have we got here? We're going to probably have chicken. It's marinated, and we call it Greek chicken, but that's delicious. And it's so big you can't eat all of it. So I hope we see you there. You're welcome. It's at our church on Bradley Street. And now let me mention just a few other things that are going on. We have the Tree of Life at the hospital, and we also have at the Saco Museum, we have the Victorian era at the Saco Museum, and then we also have the Christmas tree event, and it's a Merry Little Christmas. And then we also have Toys for Tots. Leo Menard is in charge of that, and the Marines, that's a story with the Marines started that a long time ago. There are several fairs around, and there's grief and hospice at St. Andrew's Medical Health Place, and let me see. Okay, there are different fairs, and well, that's just a few things that are going on, and there'll be many more in the season. Thank you for listening. Stay healthy, drive careful, and see you next week. Love, Zaffie. That's it. I just want to remind people of all those things. There's a lot more up there.
Good thing. All right.
Just a few to remind them.
How'd we do?
Wonderful.
Good.